So I think I win the prize for the longest title, but Ethan is a close second. So I'll start by thanking Guillaume and Pat and Eric for organizing this conference and bringing us all together. It's really great to see everybody. So colonization phase and early expansion phase sites in the Society Islands have been difficult to find and have been poorly studied. We then have a vague understanding of this archipelago's founding cultural complex and its adaptation to specific island environments through time. Here I discuss the discovery, excavation, dating, and analysis of materials from two coastal sites on Moorea, SCMO 350 and SCMO 360. My discussion focuses on three themes: the timing of island colonization and changing settlement patterns, analysis of subsurface features and artifacts to understand site function, and a discussion of faunal remains to infer diachronic shifts in subsistence practices. I end with a brief comparison to Mau 11, a high-status coastal site on Maupiti, to discuss the emergence of status differentiation and diets in the expansion phase. Site SCMO 350 is found on the southeast windward coast of Moorea in the Haumi district. While small, the Haumi district offered important resources like permanent streams, a moderately wide coastal flat, and moderately large valley, and a small bay which opens up into a reef pass. The Haumi district thus had rich terrestrial and marine resources. In 2014, the site was discovered through bucket auger testing. Auger holes suggest the site extends for 38 meters inland and 22 meters parallel to the coast. 34 meters squared were excavated in 4 blocks over the course of 2 field seasons, and all sediment was wet screened through 3mm mesh. 8 stratigraphic deposits were located. Here I focus on the earliest cultural deposits dating to the colonization phase in blocks 3 and 4. But block 2 deposits span the late expansion to centralization phase, while the block 1 deposits span the centralization phase to post-contact. Thus, all 5 phases of the Maui cultural sequence are represented at the site. At block 4, 6 meters squared were excavated to a depth of 1.28 meters. Here, the earliest cultural deposits were layer 7, a medium gray wet sand 37 to 54 centimeters thick. Other than the top 10 centimeters, layer 7 deposits were under the water table. This basal cultural deposit capped layer 8, a gray coarse-grained sand deposit. Layer 8 was fully waterlogged and included water-rolled coral and shell in addition to anaerobically preserved seeds. It is interpreted as a sterile deposit predating the Polynesian period. Layer 7 was rich in charcoal, land snails, and faunal remains. Numerous fragments of cottonwork turbo and pearl shell were recovered in addition to pearl shell coconut graters, a trolling lure, basalt adzes, and fishhook tabs. A fragment of an untanned oval lenticular adze seen at the upper right of the slide, and an unfinished archaic style trolling lure with sharp shoulders seen at the bottom right indicate the presence of archaic period deposits. The presence of 2 aligned post holes, features 29 and 30, an oven rakeout, feature 28, a charcoal lens, feature 31, at the same depth in layer 7 suggests that a cookhouse or cooking area may have been found along the eastern portion of block 4. Moving to block 3, 16 meters squared were excavated. The deepest cultural deposit was layer 6. Other than the first 10 centimeters, layer 6 deposits were under the water table, and they capped layer 8, a sterile coarse-grained sandy deposit. At block 3, layer 6 was particularly rich in charcoal, faunal remains, fire-cracked rock, and cut shell. A quadrangular adze with an incipient tang was recovered, in addition to pearl shell coconut graters, a terebra shell chisel, which is seen to the left of the first coconut grater, turbo and pearl shell fishhook tabs, and a fragmented circular pearl shell ornament seen in the middle of this slide. 2 aligned basalt cobbles associated with ili, suggestive of a paving, were also recovered. The presence of vesicular basalt cooking stones near this alignment and paving suggests a cooking structure or other domestic structure may have been present in block 3 during the layer 6 occupation. To develop a robust site chronology, 4 short-lived samples were dated from block 4, layer 7, while 7 short-lived samples were dated from block 3, layer 6. and all dates were by AMS. At Block 4, a pandanus drupe sample calibrated to the modern period. This is considered unreliable, and it likely moved downward due to crab burrowing. The remaining 3 short-lived samples overlap at 2 standard deviations. Calibrated intercepts indicate that the Block 4 layer 7 most likely dates to the 11th to early 12th centuries, between AD 1078 to 1230. These findings are consonant with artifact recovery suggesting the presence of archaic period deposits. The chronometric data firmly places layer 7 within the colonization phase, with an age range similar to Anderson's recent dating of short-lived species at the Fa'ahia Vaito'otia site on Huahine. 5 of the 7 Block 3 layer 6 samples produced overlapping calibrated age ranges. These samples provide a reliable age estimate for the layer 6 deposits between AD 1052 to 1323. Calibrated intercepts indicate that layer 6 most likely dates to the mid-12th to 13th century, or about 100 years after the Block 4 layer 7 deposits. So Block 3 layer 6 dates to either the end of the colonization phase to the start of the expansion phase. Using OxCal, I conducted a Bayesian sequence analysis where radiocarbon ages for short-lived samples were ordered on the basis of stratigraphic observations, artifact type, and calibrated radiocarbon. In the model, I grouped the early SCMO 350 dates into 2 phases, Block 3 layer 6 and Block 4 layer 7, separated by a contiguous boundary and excluding outliers. The Bayesian modeling confirms that Block 4 layer 7 dates to the early part of the colonization phase, while Block 3 layer 6 is a bit younger and likely dates to the latter part of the colonization phase. So the basal deposits at Block 3 and Block 4 provide us with excellent context to compare changes in subsistence during the early colonization phase versus the later colonization phase. At Block 4, 338 animal bones were identified to 17 species or family of species, while at Block 3, 1,342 bones were identified to 24 species or families of species. Both the Block 4 and Block 3 deposits were dominated by fish, ranging from 44 to 63% NISP. Marine mammals are found with low frequency in both phases, as are wild bird. Turtle recovery ranges from 1.4 to 3.2 NISP, and it's a bit higher in the later colonization phase than the early colonization phase. A low amount of chicken is found in the late Block 3 colonization phase deposits, with none recovered at Block 4. If we compare wild in blue on this slide versus domesticated animal use in orange, between Block 3 and Block 4, somewhat surprisingly, Block 4 deposits had a higher percentage of terrestrial mammal bone at 24.4% than the later colonization phase Block 3 deposits at 9.3%. The smaller sample size of faunal remains from Block 4 is likely skewing these data. Both assemblages are dominated by wild resources, ranging from 46 to 67% wild, with 10 to 22% medium mammal and chicken, and low frequencies of rat. Fa'ahia Vaito'otia, the only other well-studied colonization phase site in the archipelago, has a much higher incidence of bird bone than SCMO 350. Yet the 350 colonization phase faunal assemblages are similar to Fa'ahia Vaito'otia in having high frequencies of fish and a moderate presence of marine mammal and turtle. In order to track change through time and subsistence, I will briefly discuss SCMO 360, the Hapiti dune site. Located on the less favorable northwest shore of Moorea, this zone has a drier climate relative to that of SCMO 350. The northern Hapiti coastline is frequently struck by cyclones and storms, making this site a less favorable location for habitation. My excavation of the site and radiocarbon dating established the site occupation during the early expansion phase between AD 1300 to 1400. Like the colonization phase sites, fish dominate the 360 assemblage at 66% NISP. Marine mammal are no longer exploited, turtle are represented in low numbers, and bird are still present but in low numbers. The biggest shift is in the presence of terrestrial medium mammal at 13.6%, as opposed to 9.3% found at Block 3, SCMO 350. Overall, the diachronic trend is a decrease in turtle, marine mammal, and wild bird remains, and an increase in terrestrial domesticated species about 200 years after colonization. To zoom out to regional patterns, so now I'm looking at a larger number of sites. My broader analysis suggests that colonization phase sites in the Society Islands dating to between 950 to 1200 are situated in resource-rich zones to access well-watered terrestrial flatlands and marine resources. Artifact and subsurface recoveries suggest both impermanent and permanent settlement, largely focused on marine exploitation. Marine turtle are the most important non-fish taxa in the colonization phase, and bird are often well represented, similar to other coastal habitation sites dating to the colonization phase across Central Eastern Polynesia. Marine mammals such as dolphin and whale are infrequently found in early deposits, as are pig and dog. In the early expansion phase, around 1200 to 1400, Maohi settled more marginal coastal zones. Shifts in the diet across the archipelago include a decrease in turtle, marine mammal, and wild bird, and an increase in terrestrial domesticated species and in rat, roughly 200 years after colonization. These trends signal the extinction of many endemic land and bird species. They also signal likely resource depression in turtle populations at the same time that animal husbandry is intensified. One of the most pronounced shifts in the expansion phase, and I can only briefly discuss this, is the appearance of inter-site variation in fauna remains that I believe is linked to site status. Here I compare SCMO 360, interpreted as a low to moderate status coastal habitation with a fishing focus, to MAU 11 on Maupiti. I interpret MAU 11 as a high status coastal habitation site. This high status residential site, which I excavated in 2014 and 2015, is found in the basal deposits at Vaiahu, the island's only national temple in the centralization phase. Aspects of the site's architecture and material culture suggest that as early as 1300, the site was the residence of a family of high status. When comparing the early expansion phase fauna remains at both sites, we see that both lack marine mammal and have low frequencies of bird. The frequency of turtle is lower at SCMO 360 and higher at MAU 11, significant given the tapu nature of turtle. The biggest differences are found in the amounts of fish and medium mammal, with 360 having high fish at 66% and moderate medium mammal at 14%, whereas MAU 11 has the reverse, low fish at 18% and high medium mammal at 29%, almost twice that of 360. MAU 11, the high medium mammal at MAU 11 is not only suggestive of intensified animal husbandry, it signals that MAU 11 is a rather unique coastal site with high frequencies of animal domesticates throughout its sequence. So that is continuing through early expansion, late expansion, and the centralization phase. Elsewhere in the archipelago, fishing-focused residential sites like 360 continue up to the centralization phase and have artifacts and fauna remains more suggestive of lower status domestic sites. These patterns hint at the advent of increasing status differences and inequality at residential sites starting in the early expansion phase. And there's architectural and other types of material culture data that support this. My ongoing analysis of a suite of Society Island coastal sites will further examine the advent of status differences in faunal assemblages. We will also target differences in fish capture and shellfish collection in leeward versus windward contexts, and understanding the sustainability or not sustainable use of marine resource practices throughout the archipelago. And I just want to end by thanking all the people and institutions and funding agencies who supported my work. Thank you.